Hey guys, Tim Trich here from Ethernet Blueprint. Welcome to the channel and thank you for watching. Now, with technology being what it is today, it can almost really be a necessity to need to be able to extend your network from your home to an outbuilding or a barn or some other place on your property. And burying a cable isn't always an option. Maybe your location is too far away and exceeds some of the distance limitations of copper. Fiber's just plain expensive to trench and bury and get terminated. So what are your options for something like this? Well, one affordable option that you guys have is to install a wireless bridge. And today I'm going to show you exactly what that entails and how to do it. Now, there are all sorts of reasons why someone would want to extend their network from one place to another, like an outbuilding or something. There's IP cameras, maybe you need Wi-Fi out there, there's monitoring solutions, security systems, maybe some kind of smart devices. You know, sky's the limit. We just use technology everywhere in different ways. So whatever your reason is, just know Ubiquiti has you covered with a product called a wireless bridge. And there are a lot of brands out there that have these. Ubiquiti's just one of them, so you don't have to get stuck on Ubiquiti. But today we are going to be focusing on their products. Now, one product that I use pretty consistently with them is the AirMax Nanobeam AC 5AC. I've had tremendous luck with this unit. It's $99 per side, so it's even very, very affordable, and it just seems to work really well. So today we're going to set one up, and I'm going to show you end to end how that process works. So what is a wireless bridge? Let's define this thing and get on the same page there. Now, a wireless bridge is a point-to-point solution or even a point-to-multi-point solution, which I'll actually get to later in this video and explain what that means. It's really, really cool. That allows you to wirelessly extend your network from one location to another using direct line of sight. So when burying a cable is not an option, or it's a bad option, this really is a very affordable way to be able to extend your network from one place to the next. However, there are some caveats. Now, as you noticed in the definition, we talked about needing direct line of sight. And in a lot of cases where you're just trying to extend it to an outbuilding or a barn that's right on the property there, this isn't typically an issue. They're close enough together that you can even shoot this thing through trees or whatever may be in the way. However, if your outbuilding is further out there, and I've seen these cases, maybe you got a fishing shack or something that's clear down by the lake, you need to make sure you have direct line of sight to it. And the farther away these are from each other, the little point-to-point bridge units, the farther they are, the clearer the skyline needs to be for them to work really well. When you get them far apart, once you start putting things in the way, like trees or buildings or obstacles, they don't work as well. And that's what some of the complaints I read about online saying, hey, I can't get mine to work. However, if your buildings are close together, this is less of an issue. In today's example, we actually are shooting from a house to a barn to extend some cameras. And as you'll see, we can't even see the buildings. There's just too many trees in the way, and we're shooting right through them. However, we're only about 40 or 50 yards away, and these things will shoot miles. So because we're so close, it just goes right through those trees. We didn't have any issues. We got full signal, and everything was working just fine. But just understand that if your solution is calling for this to shoot really far, and the building's down over a hill or something like that, they're probably not going to work. These things have to be able to see each other. They have to have that line of sight. And the farther away they are, the clearer the path between them needs to be. Closer they are, sometimes you can get away with some things. Probably one of the other bigger gotchas that I run into is there needs to be power on both ends, right? So in a lot of cases, the barn or outbuilding does have power. This isn't really an issue. However, we see these being used to add a camera at the end of a driveway or something like that. And in cases like that, you need to have some kind of power down at the end of your driveway to be able to power the devices. They don't just power themselves. Now, there are some options to be able to solar power and things of that nature. However, just know in general, you need to have power on both ends for this to work. Secondly, you need to be able to get a cable from your network area in your home to wherever you have this dish mounted on the house, okay? And so sometimes that is a showstopper, because if your stuff is in the basement, you're going to be installing this on the exterior house in the back. Sometimes it's really difficult to get a cable there after the fact, after your house has been built. And same thing for if you are on the barn side or the outbuilding side. There needs to be a cable that goes from somewhere in that building where you're getting your power up to that device, a Cat 6 cable or whatever you guys are running. So just understand there's some cabling needs that need to happen. There are some power needs that need to happen for this type of solution to work. All right, and a little bit of an important message if you are building a home. Guys, if you're building a house and you plan on having a detached garage, maybe that garage doesn't happen day one, it's happening sometime down the road. You still need to take preparations for getting cables where they need to be, or the ability to run cables during your building process. Be thinking about it while you have framing behind you, because it is much, much easier to get cables where they need to be. And you really have two options. You can run the cables ahead of time and just leave them there for a rainy day. Then when the time comes, you just poke that cable out, plug it in, and you go. Or two, you can put in some kind of a pathway like Smurf tubing or something like that that'll allow you to run the cable at a later time. And think about it on both ends, right? So maybe you're not building the building day one, you're building it 5 years down the road. Be thinking about it from that standpoint too. Obviously, during the building, we have a little bit more flexibility for trenching wires and things like that. Maybe it's in the budget to be able to do that, and that's great. If that is an option, you should absolutely do that, because a physical connection is always going to be better than a wireless one, in my opinion. But if you can't trench it, like I said, maybe some of the distance limitations, fiber's too expensive, guys, be thinking about it during your build. You'll be really glad you did. It'll save you time, headache, and most importantly, some money for it. Okay, so let's move on to the project here at hand. So a couple weeks ago, I helped a buddy of mine install one of these systems here because he wanted to add cameras to his barn or outbuilding, and this was our best solution to do that. So we ran a cable up through his attic and hooked up one of these dishes, which I'll unbox here for you shortly, on the house. And then we installed another one on the barn and ran a cable to a flex utility box because it was going to be in a dirty area. So we want to make sure that was protecting his gear. He had a little flex 5-port switch in there, and then we installed 2 Ubiquiti G4 cameras on the barn. Now the cloud key we didn't want out in the barn, we actually put that in the house. And so the cloud key is what is acting as our controller and acting as our NVR. It's a cloud key Gen 2. So the cameras are on the barn on one side of the bridge, the router and the cloud key are in the house on the other side of the bridge, and everything just talks. We were able to adopt the cameras, get them configured the way we wanted them to, and when they record, they actually record to the cloud key in the house, all being done over that wireless bridge. Okay guys, so if you look at the project we did at my buddy's house, this is the view from Google Earth, so you can kind of see he's got his house over here, the shop or barn was over here, and you can see these trees that are in the way. There's quite a bit from a Google Earth standpoint, but because the distance was what it was, we were able to shoot through those just fine. Here is a view from the house. So as you can see, you can't see the barn at all. Like I put an arrow where it's at, but you can't see it. And then if you look from the barn side or the outbuilding side, again, you can't see it. So that's the thicket that we were shooting through as part of this setup, and it worked just fine. So I have a lot of people, wonder, hey, can I shoot this thing to a tree or whatever? It really boils down to your distance. Because this was just so close, this isn't very far away, we were able to shoot through it just fine. We had perfect signal. These devices actually have a signal meter right on the side of them, and so you can tell the signal that they're getting with their buddy just by reading the little signal meter, and we had full bars, full signal, no problems whatsoever. All right guys, so I want to show you a drawing or a diagram of what we set up. I think these really help someone setting this up for the first time, so you know how this needs to be physically connected, which is an important part of the process. So this is how we set up my buddy's house. Okay, so we have our house router over here, and then we are running the show here. We're running these cameras with a Cloud Key Gen 2. This is both our NVR and our controller, and it's going to be sitting over in the house. Then we have our power injector, which came with the point-to-point unit, okay, and that's also sitting in the house. And then over in the barn side, we have our flex utility box, power injector that's running our point-to-point device over there, and a couple G4 cameras. So take note on how these are actually physically connected to each other. So the CloudKey Gen 2 is just getting its network connectivity from the router itself. We are powering this, just so you know, with the USB-C plug-in. So it's actually just using an AC outlet to turn on. And then we ran a line also from one of the other switch ports into our power injector. Now the power injector has two sides. There's the red port, you can see, and then there's a network port over here, right? So the router needs to plug into the network port. The PoE red port always needs to be plugged into the device that you're powering. So in this case, it's the point-to-point. So we ran a line from the power injector up through the attic and then popped it through the eave of his house and then plugged it into this. And that's how it's getting its power. But it extends its network through that other port. So the network connectivity is extended through that. It shoots across to his buddy. And then basically it's the same thing on the other side. The point-to-point device is plugged into the red port so it can get its power. This becomes your hot network port. You can plug a laptop in this before you get anything else installed and test to make sure you got network connectivity. Once you plug in here, you'll pull an IP address right from the router if everything is connected and working right. In this case, we extended that down into a flex mini switch, so we had some additional ports to use, and then we plugged in some G4 bullet cameras. And then basically when they record across the point-to-point and over to the CloudKey. This is what we also use to adopt them. We could get to them from the outside world. All the stuff just worked the way it needed to, but they're actually they're actually connected to each other through this wireless bridge. So when you're putting yours together or thinking about things, these are the type of things you need to think about. And like our example where we talked about building a house, it's getting these cables right here, this one right here and this one right here, maybe run ahead of time, or a pathway to be able to get those cables run. This one runs up through the attic, this one runs down the side of the barn, and we navigated to where it needed to be. But those are the things that are harder to do once the drywall's up in cases, especially on the house side. So I wanted you guys to see this. Hopefully it helps you when you're putting together your project. Okay, so before we get into the configuration, I just want to show you how the lab is connected, and that way you guys have an understanding of what we're doing here. If you want to skip this part, you can and go right to the configuration, but I just want to show you how we are set up here for today's experiment. All right, so this one right here is representing the point-to-point device that is on our house. Okay, so this gray cable right here is actually going back over to a PoE injector, which I'll show you in a second, and is plugged directly into our router. Now, something I want to show you on the back of this particular unit here, if you go and look under there, hopefully you can kind of see it there, you notice there's two ports. Now, not all these point-to-point devices have multiple ports, but this unit does. And so it's important to point out here that that secondary port there is to allow, and it even has PoE pass-through, which means you can power another device, but it's really designed to power a second one of these. It is not designed to plug in an access point or a camera. And one of the questions we get a lot is, hey, can I just use that port to, run on the other side of my barn and just plug my camera into that? Unfortunately, the answer is no. You can cause damage to your device because the voltage and everything in these units is just different than the PoE that powers access points and cameras. So it's really not designed for that. Just want to point that out. Do not use that secondary PoE pass-through port for your camera or your access point. Usually that's done on the other side where you're trying to enable some of those services. So our gray cable comes up and over, it's just kind of drooped over here, and it's going into our PoE injector. You can see I have it plugged into the red PoE port. And then this yellow cable right here is just representing a physical internet connection to this device. Now, something I will throw in here just so you guys know, if you plan on doing any VLANs across the way at your outbuilding, make sure this cable here is set as a trunk port. That will allow it to pass all the VLANs through the bridge. And if you have a smart managed switch on the other end, it will connect into it and you'll be able to do VLANs in both places. But if you have this set to, like, say, a specific VLAN, like a camera VLAN or something, that's all it's going to pass through. It's not going to pass through all your ports. So if you plan on doing any kind of VLANing on the other side, make sure this cable is set to a trunk port. All right, let's go see how the other side is set up. So we have our device here, and he is going to shoot straight over into our point-to-point over there, which is representing the barn or outbuilding. So let's go take a look at that. Now this guy's going to be set up as a station. The one over there will be set up as an AP or access point. This will be set up as a station. So this is our receiver unit. It also has 2 ports on the back, and this main cable that's going to be powering it is plugged into the main port. The secondary port on the unit is not used. Now, I don't have it plugged in right now because we're going to configure these one at a time, but you can see it will go into the red PoE port. And then once this is online, this secondary port right here will be a live network port. We'll be able to, you could plug a laptop in this, test to make sure your connectivity is working, whatever you need to do. In this particular case, we're going to run it over here and we're going to have it actually be plugged into a network switch. By doing that, that means we get this many ports as opposed to just a single port coming out of it. So you notice I'm not using a Ubiquiti switch here, and I was just talking about VLANs. So this lab will not work with VLANs. This is a dummy switch. It's not capable of doing that, but it is capable of PoE, and I have it powering my camera up there. So it's going to do what I need it to do. It's going to allow my camera to come online. It's going to allow it to be adopted. It's going to allow all that stuff. I'm not doing any VLANing in this lab, but if I had a Ubiquiti switch here, for example, I just would need to make sure that whatever's plugged in is a trunk port, and it will receive all its signal from my network controller, and it'd see all the VLANs, and it would be able to pass that traffic, and then I could assign individual VLANs to my individual ports. It just won't work in this case. So once we get our camera online, we're going to be using Unifi Protect in the Dream Machine, and then our camera's just going to keep an eye on our back door and our back patio here to provide some security in our little lab environment. So that's how we're set up, guys. I'm going to get into the configuration next. I just wanted to kind of show you how we're set up here. You can see it's very, very similar with a few exceptions to how we did it at my buddy's house with the barn and the cloud key and stuff. But I wanted to simulate something that was very, very close here. All right, let's get started. All right, guys. So to get this thing started, the first thing we need to do is connect directly to it. So these have a Wi-Fi management radio in them that allows you to connect to them from your smartphone. As you can see in my list of Wi-Fi networks here, the NBE 5AC Gen 2 is broadcasting. This is also why I'm only setting them up one at a time, because the names are so similar that you don't know which one you're connecting to. So I want to start on the house side, so we're going to go ahead and connect to that one first, and that's why the other one I left unplugged. But basically, this allows my smartphone to connect directly to the device. Now, this is important for 2 reasons. One, once you mount this thing way up on your house, it can be a pain in the butt to get your ladder out and get up there every time you want to make a configuration change. That's no good to anybody. Or if you need to factory reset it or something. It's nice to be able to connect to it from the ground. So what you can actually do is they have this management radio that actually only broadcasts for a certain amount of time once the device powers on, and then it shuts off because we don't want a security risk. So what you can do is you can power cycle it. You can go over to the power injector and turn it on and off, let it boot up, and then it'll start broadcasting its own little NBE or whatever Wi-Fi signal it's going to do, and then you can connect directly to it from the ground. You can stand underneath of it and be, 10 feet away or 20 feet away or whatever, and connect to it and make configuration changes and things of that nature, maybe update it or whatever you're going to do. It really is handy. All right, so now that we're connected to it, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our UISP app, okay? And you can see it found a new device. So we're going to go ahead and say set up, and it is connecting my phone directly to the unit right now. Now, just so you guys know, you can set this up from a laptop. They have a management IP address too. I think it's 192.168.1.20. So you could plug a laptop into the PoE injector and pull up that browser and log into it as well. I like using the phone. I think it just makes it very, very handy. So I'm going to go ahead. You could do quick setup. You can do setup as a new access point. I'm just going to go ahead and do manual setup so you guys can see all the configurations here. So I'm going to choose United States. We are going to change the password of the unit, and notice it has to be at least 12 characters. So this is a little bit longer password. Make sure you write this down because this is how you'll log into it moving forward. So I'm just going to pick a dumb one here for our deal. Okay, don't use a 1, 2, 3, 4 thing like I'm doing. Now, now that we're in it, and just keep in mind, we can change that anytime we want once we're logged into the device. So now what I want to point out here is you can see there's a couple settings here. We have an SSID. That's how it's going to talk to its buddy. It's going to broadcast a SSID, and then the other unit is going to connect to that SSID. You have your channel width. We're going to leave that as default. We're not really going to tweak a ton of the settings, but there's a couple things I want you to see here. First off, since we're doing the house one first, this needs to be set to access point, okay? This is what's doing the broadcast signal. The other side will be the station, and that's what's going to receive the signal. Secondly, we're going to turn off point-to-point mode. Now, that seems unintuitive, but like I mentioned earlier in the video, this can actually do point to multi-point. So this particular unit here can, not all of them can, so you have to look it up in the specs if you're buying a different flavor of this, but this one can do point to multi-point, which means this one unit can broadcast as our access point, and it can connect to multiple stations as long as it's within its angle. So you could put one of these on your house and then run 2 outbuildings off of it, which is really, really great. You don't need to daisy chain 2 together. What this point-to-point mode is basically saying I only want it to be able to connect to one other unit. Maybe you have a whole bunch of them out there and you want to isolate this one to only connect to one specific unit. So you put it in point-to-point mode to do that. However, if you have that unchecked, it is set to point to multi-point mode, and that's how I like to leave it by default. All right, so let's go ahead and set our SSID. So we're going to go in here and change that. So we're just going to call this House Lab AP. Whoops. All right. We're going to give it a password. All right. So I just set it to an easy password. Guys, don't do that. Obviously, this is just a lab, so we want something easy. I can type on my phone. But this is the SSID and password we have to know on the other one to be able to connect these together. So you're going to want to write this down. All right. So we'll go ahead and say next. Now, notice at the top here, or at the bottom, we have a save, test, discard, whatever we want. And then we have a couple more tabs at the top. We have a network tab, okay? So right now the network mode is bridge. It's in DHCP IP, which means it's just going to pull IPs. That's fine. We don't have a management VLAN specifically to this, so we'll just leave that blank. And then over in system, I like to name the device too. So we want to actually name the unit. So we'll actually call this Nanobeam House. Jeez, I can't type on my phone today. There we go. And then this is where we had set that password earlier, but as you can see, you can change it. So we can choose change password, or we can change the username. Well, I'm just going to leave it default right now. So this is the username and password to log into this device at a later date. All right, so once we get all those set the way we want them, we're going to go ahead and hit save, and it's going to save the configuration to the device. All right, so it saved it. I had to go and choose, I renamed the device, so I had to go choose it again. It connected right to it, and now we're in the configuration. It says it's waiting for a station. As we scroll down and look through here, one of the things I want to point out is the wireless mode. You can see it's set to AP, point to multi-point. It's telling you what frequency it's using, its uptime, RAM, memory, and then down here at the bottom we have a configuration tab. That's just where we were. Some tools to kind of help if you want to ping some things or look at antenna alignment, stuff like that from the app, you can do that. And then under more, this is where you would upgrade your firmware. So I would normally click on that, go ahead and upgrade it and get it up to date. I'm not going to do it for this video. Everybody's upgraded firmware hopefully by now. So, but you could also reset it to factory defaults, reboot it, download support files for, support and all sorts of things. Make a backup of it. There's lots of things you can do here in the app. It really is a nice little system. So there you go. We got the Nanobeam house. Now we're going to go set up Nanobeam barn or Nanobeam outbuilding or whatever we're going to call that one. And we'll get it to connect to this one so we can start powering things online. All right, guys, so the first thing we need to do is connect to the Wi-Fi on the secondary unit. Now, you can see why it gets a little confusing because the names are so similar that it's broadcasting. But the one on the house AP was the D328, or excuse me, the D5FB. This one is actually D328. So I'm going to go ahead and click to that. And once it connects, we'll be able to connect directly to our station and get that set up. So you got to connect to them one at a time. Okay, so now we're back over in the app and you can see it has found one with the D328. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to X out of this and choose setup. So it's going to connect to it. All right, I'm going to do manual setup so you guys can see all the settings again. All right, United States. We're going to go ahead and enter a new password. I'm going to make them the same. Now, just by setting the password here, the username is UBNT, and then this is the password to access the device. It always is a good idea to change the default username as well. I think that's a little easier to do in the web browser than it is the app, but it is a good idea because if someone's trying to break into your system, they're going to try UBNT when it comes to Ubiquiti devices. All right, now it's going to bring us up to a very familiar screen for the configuration here. So let's go ahead and get the station set up. Now you'll notice that the access point is not checked. That's good. We don't want it to be checked. We already have an access point. You can leave point-to-point mode checked or unchecked. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck it for this case. And then instead of typing in an SSID, we can actually go select it, just like you would search for Wi-Fi on a phone to an access point. You can actually do that here. So you can see House Lab AP SSID. So we're going to go ahead and choose that. And then we're going to do the password for it. Okay. All right, we got that in there. So these are our settings. Access point's off. Point-to-point mode is off. We've selected House Lab AP and entered our password. I'm not going to set any of the other network set or the other wireless settings in here. Let's click over to network. Nothing to set there. Let's go over to system. Again, this is where we would name the device. So I do recommend naming it. So we can call this Nanobeam Barn. We'll call it Nanobeam Barn Station. Okay. So once we get that done, we can click back over here and I'm going to choose save from the bottom of the page. Now it does take a little bit to save. It's going to ask you if you want to log in. It's going to, act like it's stalled out. Give it time, guys. There are things happening to the device. It's sending that configuration to the device. The device has to receive that configuration and save it. And then the device is going to reboot. However, when it reboots, it will try to connect to his brother across the way. So I'm going to just go ahead and choose log out here. All right, and we're just going to wait for this to pop back up. Okay, so now instead of connecting to that generic name, we're going to connect to Nanobeam Barn Station. Okay, so now we're connected directly to it and have this come up there. And you saw earlier we had the lights come on in that little video that I showed you a minute ago. So now you can see we have throughput. We are connected. We have completely different menus here under the status page. You can see there's actually throughput happening. It's telling you it has great signal, and you can see some of the other configuration things down here that I showed you earlier as well. So it's in station mode, point to multi-point. It's chosen its frequency, which matches its brother over there, and you can see the uptime and some of the other pieces of this. There's some antenna alignment things here you can click in here. So if you're fine tuning, it'll actually play a beep noise and let you know that you're doing okay. There's pinging, there's discovery, there's all sorts of things you can do in there. And again, over in the more settings, there is where you do firmware or factory reset or something to that nature. So guys, just remember to be patient when you're doing this. It takes a little bit of time. It probably took about 5 minutes for it to send the configuration, save everything, reboot, and connect to its brother, maybe 5-10 minutes. So be patient, especially if you're doing it from the ground. But eventually, you should get a screen that looks like this that says they are talking back and forth. And you can see we have our Nanobeam Barn Station, and then we have our Nanobeam AP, which is really, really great. That's what you want. All right, guys. So I went into the UDM Pro, opened up Unifi Protect, and there is our new camera waiting to be discovered. Again, going across the bridge. So we'll go ahead and add camera.
I'll go ahead and switch over to devices. You can see that it's adopting. That was really fast. And now we can actually see live. Here I am while recording, everybody. Hello. So now we can, adjust this, make sure it's pointing the way we want it to. You make your little tweaks and get it pointing the way you want. But we are now running this camera. It is recording to an NVR, which is our UDM Pro across the way, all going through the bridge. Seamless video. It's not choppy. Everything is working really, really well. It just is not too bad. It's a good way to do this.
Okay, guys, that is it for this video. I hope you found it helpful. I know there's a lot of moving parts to this, and there was a lot of steps that we did to make this all work. You got to make sure everything's plugged in correctly. You got to make sure that you're connected to the right SSID as you program them one at a time, and then you kind of cross your fingers and hope it all comes together. However, I've done this multiple times and it gets easier. And if you want to set it up in a lab like this ahead of time and then just go mount them on the poles, they'll just connect. You don't have to do all this while they're 30 feet in the air up on a ladder or any of that stuff. You can pre-configure your stuff and then just go mount it. Once they see each other, they'll just start talking. But setting it up with your smartphone, super easy to do. Don't get lost in all the little settings and granular things that you can do in the web interface. There's a lot there. But typically when I set these up for people, I just use my smartphone. It works really, really easy. It's fast. And then down the road, I will use the browser to just update firmware because I can do that from the comfort of my office or wherever I'm doing that, which is just really, really nice. You don't have to be out at the building to do an update or something like that. So that's typically how I do it. Obviously, everybody's needs are a little bit different. Maybe this isn't your normal property. This is a secondary property in which you would need to be there, or you'd have to VPN into that network to be able to access these devices. You can't update them through like the UISP app. You got to be on the network. You have to be connected somehow for you to access the devices. So, in cases like where this is maybe a cabin, a hunting cabin that you have or something like that, you're going to have to VPN into that network, which again, Ubiquiti allows you to do, and we can look into doing some of that stuff in later videos. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. This is a really, really nice way. It's an affordable way, and we were picking up good speeds. There's no latency. It works great for like camera-like scenarios or adding Wi-Fi out there or whatnot. Just really, really works slick. These things are very, very simple to set up. It takes a little bit of practice. So I hope you found it helpful. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you guys in a future video.